I've just spent the last week building what is one of the best Witherbloom the Balance decks that you're able to find anywhere. But to truly test myself, I wanted to find out if I could build the best possible Witherbloom deck for high power and bracket 4. But I really had no idea whether this was even doable. So I built it, handed it to someone else in my community, and what happened next genuinely caught me off guard. So stick around and be as surprised by this Witherbloom deck as I was. Now what truly kicked my dopamine receptors into overdrive is that the engine that does all the heavy lifting in this deck is 3 cards from Tempest, Stronghold, and Future Sight. Buyback cards that most players watching this have literally never ever cast, and arguably the best deck that I've cooked up this year, held together by 3 relics older than most people watching this video. What a time to be alive. So let's yap about why this deck is so powerful, why it's so enjoyable to play, and as always, I'll teach you a bunch of things along the way about building an absolute banger of a commander deck. And if you're about to click off the video because you're thinking, man, I don't even play bracket 4, why would I watch a degen combo deck come together? Just hold your horses. Because the single most useful lesson in this whole video has nothing to do with combos and everything to do with knowing where your deck belongs. So stick around for that one too, it'll change how you build at every power level. So the moment that I saw Witherbloom, I knew this was a commander that I personally needed to build. Just to make sure we're on the same page, Witherbloom the Balancer is an 8-mana Golgari Elder Dragon. It has affinity for creatures, which means that if we have 6 creatures in play, Witherbloom costs 2 mana. And if we have more, the affinity will cover even possible command attacks. Nice. She has flying and death touch, but that's not the most relevant here. The big deal is she gives all of our instants and sorceries affinity for creatures too. As a long-time affinity tragic and someone whose main commander deck is Merrin, a creature-based spellslinger commander in the Golgari color pairing was pretty much made for me. It's also a playstyle that I haven't really seen much in this color pairing, making it even more exciting to cook up. And as a little bit of foreshadowing, the spells we get to cast and the wild tutors we get to run are so incredibly fun. But I am getting ahead of myself. I started thinking about the possible deck I wanted to build, and it was clear to me that this is going to be a commander that's not going to be in any way healthy to play in bracket 2. Witherbloom will understandably be kill on sight, and if it doesn't die, will do incredibly powerful and painful things to people. This is a commander with an incredibly high power ceiling, and a play pattern that can be very oppressive in slower environments. This dynamic is far better employed in a higher bracket like bracket 3 or really bracket 4. If you're here for lessons, this is probably lesson number 1. That there's a time and place for every commander or experience, and it's better to find the right fit or table for a commander or deck, even if it's not the normal bracket that you play in. Because trying to run something broken at lower power levels or vice versa is only going to cause unhappiness, either for you or the people you're playing with. Now I wanted to test myself a little bit and set myself a task of seeing if I could cook up the best possible Witherbloom deck for bracket 4. But this now created a problem that I had to solve. I'd seen there was an infinite combo with Sprout Swarm, so I had a thread to pull on, but the combo was really the easy part. To make this powerful enough to be a real bracket 4 deck, I would need a board full of creatures and a payoff, and the Sprout Swarm piece. And I need all of that to come together by turn 4 or 5, reliably against 3 other people trying to stop me. That's 4 things on the table at once by turn 4. Honestly, I wasn't really sure this was possible, so how did we get there? The answer, and this is the lesson that applies to every deck you'll ever build, is to start with the end in mind. This means thinking about the endgame board state that we need to achieve to win, and all the cards that we need to play to get us there. In this case, I see Witherbloom as a setup and payoff deck, like any combo deck. Witherbloom gives us a really strong direction here. It wants us to make a bunch of small guys, after which we play Witherbloom, and then it allows us to fire off really big spells. Those spells can just be big and impactful, like In Garruk's Wake or Last March of the Ents, or just a huge X spell like Torrent of Hailfire. In this deck, we're going to want almost everything to be a creature, an instant, or a sorcery. When thinking about our win conditions in the desired endgame board state, there's clearly lines where we do infinite combo loops, needing Sprout Swarm and a payoff like Mirkwood Bats. One of my first other thoughts was a combination of spells like In Garruk's Wake and the recently unbanned Biorhythm. Combine these 2 spells create a potential 4-mana win condition once Witherbloom is in play, because we'd kill everyone else's creatures and then set their life totals to 0. And that is just the tip of the cool thing iceberg when it comes to Witherbloom. In terms of broader strokes of what this deck is going to want, we definitely need a bunch of creatures in play to power Witherbloom's affinity. Depending on the direction that the deck goes, that could lean towards mana dorks and value creatures, or you could be trying to make as many tokens as possible. We want a healthy amount of big payoff spells, and those spells need to cover things like card draw removal and obviously ways to win the game. We would probably also need some protection for our game plan because bracket 4 is notoriously full of interaction. Witherbloom herself probably doesn't need too much protection because again we can cheat her command attacks. It's at this point that I go and throw a very wide net to find the cards that I'd want, looking at a variety of search terms across Scryfall. This typically involves me finding 1 or 2 cards that I definitely want, and then using similar phrasing that I find on those cards to find more. I'll repeat this process over and over for all the cards that we want, like mana dorks, token generation, or big instants and sorceries to power out our vegetables of card draw removal, likely some tutor effects, and of course the payoffs to win the game. Those searches may yield the win conditions automatically, but I think the likely outcome will be that I'll have to do some very specific work around the combos. As a bracket 4 deck, it's going to need to be as efficient as possible in using both cards and mana to win the game. And whilst the allure and idea of casting an Exsanguinate where X is 50 is cool, it's probably not going to be the most efficient or reliable way for us to win with this deck. If that's the win condition that you want and the deck that you want, I think it will work well in bracket 3, but I doubt that's where I will end up for this specific build at higher powers. If you want to build your own deck list for bracket 3, I'll link the first card shortlist that I made below the like button, as that could help you shortcut and save some time. Despite the fact that I'm trying to make this deck very powerful, one thing that's very important to me is that I don't just want to build in a bunch of combos that could win the game in any generic Golgari deck. I definitely want this deck to feel unique, and I want the combos that we have to synergize with and rely on Witherbloom, which means no standalone 2-card infinites like Chain of Smog and Witherbloom Apprentice. With all that said, let's take a look at the deck that I ended up with. Or should I say deck, as I have both an all-gas, no-breaks, expensive version and a much more budget-friendly version of the same deck. And I want to flag the budget version now because for some of you it might genuinely be the better deck. Not the compromise, but the actual pick, and more on why later. So I'm going to walk you through the different categories of cards, highlight some of the standouts in the deck, then we'll talk through the combos, how to play the deck, and finally we'll look at the budget version. And keep an eye out as we go, because there are a few staple cards in here that Witherbloom turns into something that frankly just shouldn't be legal. I'll point out the most egregious one for you. The end product of the deck is very much in line with the broad buckets that I outlined at the beginning. We've got our ramp, our ways of making some affinity fodder for Witherbloom, some card draw, removal, a whole heap of tutors, our ways to win the game, and some ways to protect our game plan. I definitely wanted and achieved a heavy focus on creatures within the deck, given how well that supports Witherbloom, who in turn supports our other win conditions. We have an abundance of cheap, low-to-the-ground creatures that are sacrifice outlets, draw sources, ramp, or combo pieces. And this pairs really well with a lot of our tutors that specifically fetch creatures. I know tutors can be divisive in Commander, but honestly the way that these tutors feel in this deck is probably the best they've ever felt for me. All of this makes a deck that, at least to me, feels fairly unique in the way that it plays compared to most other decks. There is a little bit of overlap between this and my Marin deck, but honestly this is way more powerful and even more fun. So let's start with the heart of the deck, the combo pieces and win conditions. A trio of cards from Future Sight, Stronghold, and Tempest, and yeah, these are the 3 relics that I promised you all the way at the very beginning. First up are our combo engine spells in Sprout Swarm, Lab Rats, and Corpse Dance. This whole deck, and probably the best deck I've built so far this year, is balanced on 3 buyback cards from the late 90s. The use of these old cards immediately sends my nostalgia and dopamine receptors into overdrive, because I used to use Corpse Dance as a Cunning Wish toolbox target when I played Psychotog Control as a teenager. These are the 3 most important spells in the deck, and all of them rely on the buyback mechanic, and to win, we have to play one of these 3 spells. Sprout Swarm and Lab Rats make a token creature, and Corpse Dance allows us to reanimate a creature from our graveyard. This effect, paired with a mixture of mana generation and a payoff, gives us infinite combo loops because of Witherbloom's affinity effect. I will explain these combos in a minute in detail, but to complete the combo of these, we run a bunch of other support pieces, and these pieces all cross over between these 3 core spells. Corpse Dance can work with other creatures in our deck, but Blood Pet is the cleanest line with it. For mana generation and sacrifice outlets, we run Viscera Seer, Warren Soul Trader, and of course, Phyrexian Altar. Honestly, I almost didn't run the Altar because it's the hardest to tutor for, but I do think we need a backup for Warren Soul Trader. For payoffs, once we start looping, we have Blood Artist, Zulaport Cutthroat, and Witherbloom Apprentice. All 3 gain us life and ping our opponents when we either play a spell or have a creature die, which is critical with Warren Soul Trader as a combo piece, as it costs us life when we sacrifice a creature to make mana. We also have Mirkwood Bats as another clean option for a Sprout Swarm combo payoff. When it comes to complex deck building decision making, what we take out is almost as, if not more important than what we actually leave in the deck. With that in mind, I think there's actually a reasonable argument to be made for removing Mirkwood Bats from the deck. Because in this specific deck, Witherbloom Apprentice is doing everything that it does, but better. It's mainly here for redundancy, but these micro decisions require a bunch of data that I don't have yet, as this is a fairly new build. It's very common for me that a commander deck will change by about 10 to 20% over the 6 months that follow after I do the first major build and refinement process. Given their reaction with our win cons, let's talk about one of my favorite parts of this deck, the Tutors. When it comes to the Tutors, I've tried to align strongly with a creature-led theme. My favorite Tutors in the deck are Green Sun Zenith, Finale of Devastation, Nature's Rhythm, and Court of Calling. Each of these works really well to grab important pieces early, like a game where I grabbed a Warren Soul Trader on turn 4 because I had no black mana. It then allowed me to play out the game with a win attempt in the next 2 turns. But I'll show you a little bit later in the video. These Tutors get very strong the moment we have Witherbloom in play because the X will usually be equal to 6, 7, or even more. It becomes incredibly easy to tutor up a Protean Hulk, which is often just game winning by itself as it can fetch multiple of our win condition pieces. We also run some standard boring tutors like Vampiric or Demonic Tutor. I thought about adding Demonic Intent, but I'm not convinced that there won't be awkward times where we won't have enough creatures in play that we can sacrifice. Whilst our deck is built around having disposable creatures, this is still a non-bow even in the best case because it works against our affinity. There's also Natural Order, which whilst it does require us to sacrifice a creature, fetches us and puts a Protean Hulk onto the battlefield, all for just 4 mana. We then have 2 incredibly cool tutors in Increasing Ambition and Beseech the Queen, which are both just broken with Witherbloom. Increasing Ambition will basically tutor us 3 cards for 2 black mana, and Beseech is a free tutor for anything if we have 6 creatures in play. Given our win condition relies on instants and sorceries, these help us get them when we need them. Another card that's incredibly useful in this deck is Grim Servant, which importantly for our various creature tutors is a creature. So basically any creature tutor becomes a demonic tutor for our core non-creature spell combo pieces. And it can even be tutored for with the Protean Hulk. Nice! Speaking of Hulk, we obviously have that, and what we want to fetch will vary, but it will usually be a Warren Soul Trader and a Witherbloom Apprentice. Lastly, we have one of my favorite green spells in Tooth and Nail. It can for 2 mana basically win us the game all by itself. A card that normally costs 9 mana instead being cast for 2 and just ending games. Exactly what we're looking for in bracket 4. If we resolve it, we can fetch both Grim Servant and the Hulk. The Servant in turn can fetch Sprout Swarm, and the Hulk can fetch Mirkwood Bats or Witherbloom Apprentice, or a combination of our other win conditions. Either way, unless someone stops us, we are very definitely winning the game. Moving on from tutors, let's take a look at our card draw. Now I think that the card draw is probably one of the weaker areas in the deck, but with 12 tutors we've basically traded some card advantage for precision choice. On the low end we've got Chattering Augur, Elvish Visionary, and Wall of Blossoms, all are 2 mana creatures that draw us a card. These are incredibly simple yet effective in our game plan. It may seem insane to run these fairly weak and even bad creatures in a powerful bracket 4 deck, but they fulfill an important role here. They are proactive early game plays that give us an affinity count and they replace themselves. In this deck, they are a smoothener that I am never sad to see. We also have Sylvan Library at the same mana cost that digs 3 cards into our deck. From there, we jump straight into the more expensive cards. Cards like Return of the Wild Speaker, Lifestream's Blessing, Rishkar's Expertise, or Last March of the Ents all draw us 5 cards or more for 1 or 2 mana. March also allows us to play out even more creatures that we draw. Stinging Study draws us 8 cards for 1 mana, and have you ever wanted to cast Ad Nauseam for 2 mana? Seems pretty good, right? Ad Naus will reliably dig us into our win conditions here, even if there are 15 or more cards into our deck, because the low average casting cost of the cards in our deck mean the life loss won't really be a problem most of the time. Guys, I hate to say it, but I think we broke Ad Naus. Outside of this, I also considered cards like Razaketh or Yawgmoth as card draw or tutoring engines here, but they're in the maybe board for consideration because I think they could be a little bit clunky. Our ramp in this deck is really straightforward. We have lots of little dorks because each of them effectively gives us 2 mana due to their affinity count. The standouts here are Birds of Paradise, Elves of Deep Shadow, and Gilded Goose that can work with Corpse Dance as a loop when it brings them back with haste. From a pure mana power perspective, both Badger Molcub and Fanatic of Ronas offer us a lot of explosiveness. Removal-wise, I've opted for a few reliable removal spells that are hopefully free or low in casting cost. Assassin's Trophy, Beast Within, and to a degree Withering Torment can deal with non-creature permanents, whereas Deadly Relic, Lethal Scheme, and Pile-On will hopefully all be free spells based on their casting cost reduction. One of the more versatile removal cards in the deck is Alpha Deathclaw, which is a great tutor target to deal with problematic permanents that can stop us from winning the game, including lands. Next up is our little dudes. These are creatures littered across the deck, but getting to the sweet spot of about 6 affinity is very important, so we've got some guys to help us. Both Bitterbloom Bearer and Bitterblossom make us a bunch of fairies across of turns and will typically yield 2 to 3 creatures by about turn 4, all by themselves. Marionette Apprentice brings along a friend and can be a stand-in payoff if we need it. Nest Invader is basic but gives us 2 bodies for 2 mana, as does Saproling Migration and Verdant Command. Command also comes with some really great utility if we need it. Weaponcraft Enthusiast gives us 3 creatures for 3 mana, which is a good deal. We've also got Sylvan Offering that for 3 mana will also give us 3 creatures, but as an X spell, we can get even more if we have more mana. Not to be ignored, we have some great toolbox stacks pieces. The first is Orcish Bowmasters, which is here as a security policy against people drawing their entire deck or excessive wheeling. It's also 2 creatures for 2 mana, which is pretty good. Springheart Nintuko makes us a 1/1 every time we play a land, so we'll almost always be at least 2 bodies for 2 mana with a much higher upside. We've also got Opposition Agent and Douthie Voidwalker to shut down combo decks searching for their win cons and to shut down opposing graveyard shenanigans. And given all of these are creatures, it means all of our tutors can fetch them very, very easily. When it comes to protecting our game plan, we've got Dosen, who stops people from interacting on our turn, and we've also got Sylvan Safekeeper to give us stuff Shroud. To round out our protection package, we've got Veil of Summer that'll shut down opposing counter magic. All of this pairs really well with our tutor package and gives the deck both incredible resilience to both hit our game plan, but also gives us a powerful toolbox to shut down opposing ones. When it comes to the mana base, it's pretty straightforward, though I would call out that we've got a lot of fetch lands, specifically because of how they interact with Springheart Nintuko. We don't need them if they're too costly, and I've also not included Gaia's Cradle here, which would be incredible, but it costs a whole lot, probably more than the rest of the deck combined. But hey, if you're proxying or loaded, feel free to add in the Gaia's Cradle. Alright, those were some cool cards, but how do we use them to win the game on turn 4? This is where our combos come in. And these right here are the win conditions that powered my friend in my community to a swift 5 back-to-back wins after picking up the deck with 0 experience. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to touch on something that I think is an important call out to the newer or more casual players, especially if you judge or look down on higher power play, thinking that it's no fun. I would argue that there are 2 things that make a game of Magic the most fun. The first is an abundance of game actions, which is playing spells and abilities, and the second is interacting with the other players in the game. Whilst the Bracket 4 game, where the game is over anywhere between turn 4 through 6, may sound cutthroat and completely unfun, there are as many game actions and interaction packed into these few turns as there would be in the average Bracket 2 game, and possibly even more. And that's equally as many opportunities for yapping, banter, politics, and hijinks. It's just that everyone is using cheaper, more efficient spells than they do at lower brackets, and high power doesn't have to be bland. Like, come on, we're playing Last March of the Ants, Tooth and Nail, and Increasing Ambition. How cool are some of these cards? But I digress. Back to the business of our combos. All of our combos require having a bunch of little guys as a baseline for the affinity. How many guys we'll need will be based on the colorless casting cost of all the cards required to win. In general, our combos will look like Witherbloom, plus some small guys, plus some combo pieces. Let's use Sprout Swarm as an example. To make it loop, we need 4 colorless mana to pay its buyback cost. If we already have Witherbloom and an Apprentice in play, we only need 2 more dudes or some open mana to start the loop. Because the spells we use for our combo loops make creatures, after the first loop or 2, we will make the creatures that cover the affinity gap. Our deck is an all-out combo deck built around Witherbloom, so all of our combos rely on having her in play. This deck can reliably win on turn 4 or 5, but despite that, the deck is highly themed around creatures and Witherbloom. I personally wouldn't trade the unique playstyle for a tiny bit more power. The core combo that the deck is built around needs only Witherbloom, Sprout Swarm, and a payoff like Witherbloom Apprentice. There are a bunch of other incredibly cool or less efficient combos and win lines, but the deck simply didn't have enough space, so I'll mention them a bit later after the main ones. For this main combo specifically, Sprout Swarm has Convoke, so with 2 creatures out, our first cast and buyback of the spell costs a single green mana. Then, the Saproling we create can pay for the green mana to cast it again, but we need 1 other generic mana as we have 3 creatures in play to cover the affinity gap. After that, the affinity pays for all the colorless mana, and the Saproling that we make pays for the Convoke, so we can cast it again and again and again to infinity. And each time that we do, Witherbloom Apprentice gives us 1 life and drains 1 life from our opponents. We simply win the game. If you want to win the game, hop all over the like and subscribe buttons so the algorithm fires my next banger directly into your eyeballs. Now, if we don't have either Witherbloom Apprentice or Mirkwood Bats, we can instead do the same thing if we use a Sacrifice Outlet paired with the Blood Artist or Zulaport Cutthroat. Instead of now winning the game via cast triggers with the Witherbloom Apprentice, we're winning with death triggers of each Saproling that we sacrifice. This is very similar to how our combo functions with Lab Rats. Lab Rats does not have Convoke and simply has buyback 4. So we have the same overall cost, but we need a way to generate the mana each loop given the lack of Convoke on the main spell. Witherbloom and Lab Rats, paired with a mana sacrifice outlet like Phyrexian Altar or Warren's Soul Trader, and one of our payoffs, now gives us another infinite loop that functions the same way as the last one with Sprout Swarm did. Finally, we have Corpse Dance. Corpse Dance also has buyback and also has a total mana cost of 5, including 1 black pip. With enough affinity to pay for the colorless casting cost, if we then add a blood pet to the scenario, we can sacrifice the blood pet to make a black mana, then play Corpse Dance to get it back. We can then pay the buyback cost to return Corpse Dance to our hand, and we can sacrifice the blood pet to make mana and cast the Corpse Dance and get it back, and we can do that infinitely. If we then add in a Witherbloom, a Blood Artist, or a Zulaport Cutthroat, we simply win the game. Now, if we don't find the blood pet, we can instead combo out with Corpse Dance by having a mana dork that makes black mana, like Birds of Paradise or Elves of Deep Shadow, a sacrifice outlet to get them into the graveyard, and a payoff, again, like a Blood Artist. We start the combo by having the mana dork in the graveyard. We can cast Corpse Dance targeting it and buy it back. Because the creature comes in with haste, we can tap it to make a black mana, and then we can sacrifice it to the sacrifice outlet, and we can do it all again indefinitely. These 3 cards and the win conditions that they create are the most reliable and powerful win cons, and all play incredibly well with our creature-based synergies, both in terms of affinity and the tutors we're using. I mentioned a bunch of other great win cons and combos, and these are the ones that I cut from my specific deck. I already mentioned Biorhythm and In Garruk's Wake, but I chose not to run these given the need to get 2 non-creature cards out of our deck. That is simply far less reliable than the creature-based win cons. Then there's 2 combo lines that I took out purely because we don't have the space. Both are buyback based, and the first is Disturbed Burial. It operates in a very similar way to Corpse Dance, but instead returns a creature to our hand. If this is paired with a creature like a Greedy Freebooter and a mana generating sacrifice outlet, it allows for a similar loop that Corpse Dance does. A lack of space and getting back 2 to 3 card slots in my deck was the only reason that I took this out, and it's a fantastic combo that I use extensively in the budget list. There's also a great but slightly more convoluted combo with Worm Calling. Worm Calling is another spell that has buyback and makes a token. If we pair that with either Carnival of Souls or Earthcraft and pair that with a mana generating sacrifice outlet, this functions similar to how our other combos do, but with extra support required. In the early idea for the deck, I actually wanted to create more of a Storm style playstyle, where I create a lot of tokens that allow me to draw more cards and create more tokens till eventually I can just cast an Exsanguinate for like 50 life. But I didn't like that time-hogging playstyle, or the fact that it was objectively just weaker, slower, and more fickle than the existing game plan that I have now. But if that sounds cool to you, I put my card shortlist down in the comments below the like button, and you can use that to tinker with your own list. When it comes to playing this deck, I'm not going to give you an exhaustive guide or primer because honestly, knowing the combo lines is like 80% of what you have to know to pilot this deck well. And this deck is pretty simple to pilot compared to something amazing yet brain-melting like the combo lines in the Azula deck that I built a few months back. I will have a touch on what you want at the start of the game. In your opening hand, you likely want at least 3 sources of mana, ideally 2 lands and a mana dork. Beyond that, your focus are the 3 key spells in Sprout Swarm, Lab Rats, and Corpse Dance. Beyond those, you're looking for your other matching combo pieces or tutors to fetch the various pieces that you may need. Now, rather than telling you how to play the deck, what I'd rather do is show you some of the examples from my Goldfishing, because I think that'll give you a way better idea of how I try to pilot this deck to get a win. In this first test, this opening hand has 3 lands, a mana dork, a tutor, and a way to make tokens to fuel our affinity. Not bad at all. Turn 1, I draw a Vampiric Tutor, which is nice, and I play the land and the mana dork. Turn 2, I draw a land, and I play Weaponcraft Enthusiast to make some tokens. On turn 3, I draw and play a Verdant Command, making 2 more tokens. On the end step before I untap, I'll also play the Vampiric Tutor, fetching Sprout Swarm. On turn 4, I draw the Witherbloom Apprentice, which is a hell of a top deck, and I play it and Witherbloom. With a Sprout Swarm in hand and plenty of creatures, I can now combo out. And that is not bad at all. This was my first Goldfish with the deck, and I definitely wasn't expecting a turn 4 win in my first attempt, so I was very happy with this. Now, this obviously doesn't take into account the resistance from my opponents, and I definitely had some good draws, but as my first test, it told me that the deck could definitely do the thing. But okay, let's run it back. What if we have a worse opening hand? Well, this one has 2 lands, a mana dork, a Bitter Blossom to make some tokens, a creature tutor, and Sprout Swarm. Now, you may be thinking, what the hell? That sounds like a pretty great hand to me, but we have no source of black mana. I think we've all been mana screwed way too many times to know that the right thing to do here is to mulligan. But this is Goldfishing, it's quite literally limit testing territory, so fuck it, we ball. Now, I didn't think this hand would work, so keep that in mind because how it resolves is half the reason that I trust this deck as much as I do. And I didn't capture every turn because again, I expected to get mana screwed, slap myself on the wrist, and go again. So instead of turn 1, we start on turn 3. By turn 3, I had hit no black mana sources. I did draw Ad Nauseam, which is really great if you have black mana, but in this instance made my pain even worse. But then I realized I could cast Nature's Rhythm and tutor for Warren Soul Trader because it can both create black mana and is a combo piece. Not bad. Visually, from there we skipped from turn 3 to turn 5, but on turn 4, I played the Augur and the Bitter Blossom by sacrificing creatures to make the black mana. On turn 5, I now play Witherbloom, and I can now sacrifice a fairy and another creature to play Ad Naus. Now I'm expecting to have to flip anywhere between 10 to 20 cards to hopefully hit the right pieces, but 4 cards in, I hit a Blood Artist, and I can now play it, and then combo out with Sprout Swarm. Not bad. I did multiple other tests, like this one that sees me comboing it out in turn 4 with Lab Rats, Soul Trader, and Blood Artist, but I think you get the idea by now. Which brings me all the way back to where we started. Remember I said I handed this deck to someone in my community, and then something caught me off guard? They had not played this deck at all, and had told me that they weren't really comfortable with combo decks, and right after seeing it, they plowed straight into the fires of Bracket 4 and won 5 games in a row. A clean 5-0 straight out of the gate with a deck built on 3 cool buyback spells from the 90s and an overpowered Affinity Dragon. When I set myself the task of breaking Witherbloom in Bracket 4, I wasn't quite sure that it was possible as it seemed like the setup would take too long or there wouldn't be enough support beyond the Sprout Swarm line. But I think the results kind of speak for themselves, both in how resilient and consistent the deck is, but also how straightforward and dare I say easy it is to pilot, even if you have very limited combo experience. The deck just has so much flexibility provided by the Tutor suite. And while many people think tutors are boring, the way they enable the fluid different game plans in the toolbox here for me just make this so incredibly fun to play. Creating this deck was very fun, but it also tested me a whole lot. I really had to exercise restraint to cut back on the different lines and combos in the deck so that I could fit in enough of the vegetables and smootheners that the deck needs to feel good to play. I have played many high power decks made by other people that feel absolutely horrible to play because you end up with tons of clunky hands and a variety of different combo pieces that don't interact well with each other, or you have a handful of removal and interaction but no proactive game plan cards. This one, however, has felt very smooth, and hey, with an immediate 5-0 record from someone that doesn't know how to pilot it, I'm not the only one having that experience. Now, as much as I think this deck is amazing, it does cost $1,600 to build. I can make that somewhat cheaper, but rather than giving you a $1,000 list, what about a version that costs only $250? And this is the version that I flagged right at the start, the one that I said might genuinely be the better pick for a lot of people. It's not quite what I would consider budget, but in the context of high-powered Bracket 4, it very much is. The core of the deck stays very similar with similar combo lines. We still win with Sprout Swarm, Lab Rats, and swap Corpse Dance for Disturb Burial. We keep all the fun stuff like Tooth and Nail and Increasing Ambition. We even get to add some new cool tech in cards like Dark Petition and Seasons of the Past. We simply take out the most expensive lands and all the boring staples. No more demonic or vampiric tutors, but instead the far more whimsical and interesting experience that for many of you may well be an improvement rather than a nerf. No commander deck is perfect, especially if it's just been built, and I think there are some minor tweaks that you can make to this deck to make it a little bit better, but for the most part, I think this deck is pretty damn good. If there's anything you want illuminated about why I made certain choices in this process, or you just have a related question, yeet it at me in the comments. I'd love to yap about it. Or come and ask me when I stream live on YouTube and Twitch on Saturday at 8 PM Eastern Time. I'll be doing Q&A and yapping about decks just like this. If you like this and find it helpful, please hop all over the like button, and whilst you're down there hopping, subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you want to support me, head over to my Patreon, and a big thank you to everyone that does that. Or if you love this and you can't be bothered to build decks like this yourself, I can help, and you can find that over on my Ko-fi, all of which you can find the links to down below the like button. And last, but very definitely not least, if you like this, go and check out my video where I turned Henzi into a high-powered broken Eldrazi combo deck, or my video about Azula. And as always, thank you for being here.